Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and this is a follow-up to sort of, well, the RX 480 GTR dying. So we're gonna basically to go over what went wrong and why the card died. So, what condition is the card in right now? For those of you who don't want to watch the whole stream, uh, the memory controller on the card is damaged to the point that the card will no longer run anything at stock clocks. So it's unusable. Completely, utterly unusable. There are two possible reasons why it's in that state. One of them is I fed the memory controller way too much voltage. Well, too much voltage, not necessarily way too much. It really isn't that much voltage that I gave it extra, but then again, memory controllers are fragile. The other one is that for the basically during the stream I was complaining about the thermal paste disconnecting from the GPU core, which is a constant issue on LN2. Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut is supposed to be one of the better pastes for avoiding that issue, but apparently there's some batch-to-batch variants, so yeah. And also GPUs are much higher heat load, so that tends to make the issue more problematic than the fact that you have an LN2 pot at a 90-degree angle instead of flat on the card. That causes some issues as well. End result is that, yeah, I was having cracking issues. So at some point during the stream, I decided, you know what, we're going to reapply the thermal paste on the card. And I used the line method. So when I disassembled the card, I noticed something very concerning. If you look at this, this right here is a die shot of Polaris. So here, like, this is all stream processors, and then this right here is the memory controller for GDDR5. So that's the memory controller. And then down here you have things like your PCIe and your display output. So, yeah. Well, what happened is that the thermal paste, which I will change colors for, what should I use? I want to use gray. Let's see how that goes. That's not nearly good enough. Let's make it bigger. Yeah, so, you know, I did the line, and that would sort of be there. And what ended up happening is when I mounted the LN2 pot, I got this. So I got coverage like that. And, well, actually it wasn't quite that bad. But this corner... this corner right here wasn't covered. So there is a small chance that what ended up destroying the memory controller was not, in fact, my ridiculously high memory controller voltage, but the fact that there was no thermal paste covering part of the memory controller. That's really great. You know, that's freaking awesome. And that's why I use the manual spread method instead of any of the dot methods and all that stuff, which is everybody's like, use the dot method, it's the best. The problem I have with anything but the manual spread method is that if you do a dot, right, then, right, we have our dot, then there's a very high probability that you'll end up with something that looks like that. Which, you know, that doesn't look that bad until you realize how thermal physics works. And in order for heat to travel from those, you know, uncovered extremities, so like for heat to get out of that area, this whole area has to be hotter than this area. Otherwise, there's no heat transfer because heat requires a temperature difference. How big would that temperature difference be? I have no idea. Silicon is not the world's best thermal conductor, but it's also not a complete disaster. It's not that bad. Otherwise, of course, you'd be seeing manufacturers desperately trying to like shave the die thickness down or something. which the die is very thin, but, you know, it could be thinner, as you can actually take a piece of sandpaper and grind a bit off the top and it'll still work. So there's a good layer of silicon before you actually get to the circuitry that actually puts out all the heat. But still, you get a very real issue of this being a hot spot, that being a hot spot, and that being a hot spot. This isn't an issue on CPUs because the CPUs have an integrated heat spreader. GPUs don't have integrated heat spreaders, you have the bare die. And if your thermal paste does this, which if you use a dot method, this is really not that hard to achieve. If you put slightly too little thermal paste in a dot in the center and then push down, this is what you're going to get. And those hotspots are obviously really bad. So there's a small chance that what ended up destroying the memory controller is the uneven thermal paste spread, which is like great. And the funny thing about the dot method is like, oh, but then Buildzoid, why don't you just check how the thermal paste spread? If I go and check how the thermal paste spread on the die, right? So I push it down on the heatsink, I pull it back off the heatsink, I look how the thermal paste looks. Well, now I need to reapply the thermal paste again. So it's basically impossible to get a consistent mount with dot method, which is why I don't like it. But I was hoping on the live stream, you know, I was sort of at the end of my resources in terms of dealing with a crack issue. So I was like, maybe, just maybe, my manual spread is introducing air bubbles between the LN2 pot and the die, and those are causing the cracking. Well, I think the air bubbles would have probably been a better option than this. You know, this kind of thing. Well, actually, what I ended up with on the GPU was this was good, that corner was good, that corner was good, but this one, that one corner down there was screwed. And that corner was not covered properly. So that's one potential reason for why the card lost its memory controller. The other issue is, of course, the voltage I was pushing into the memory controller. So the reason why that was an issue is I never actually checked what the stock memory controller voltage is, which, looking back on that, and I mean like physically checked, I referenced like software and stuff. If you look at the BIOS editors, it's like 1 volt memory voltage. And if you look at Wattman, it's 1 volt memory voltage. The thing is, that voltage that you have access to in software doesn't actually seem to do anything. Or at least, I've tried checking what it does, can't tell you what it does. Because it's not actually capable of talking to any of the voltage controllers on the card. Because there are 4 voltages on a Polaris 10 GPU. You have vCore, memory voltage, memory controller, and display drive. And display drive is an integrated voltage control, like little VRM chip, and you can't talk to it. It won't talk to you. It doesn't know how much power goes through. Well, it knows how much power goes through it, but there's no way to get any data out of it. You can't communicate with that chip. It's completely impossible to talk to because it doesn't use I2C or anything. I2C or I2C. I'll just call it I2C. I know it's not how you're supposed to pronounce it, but whatever. Then you have your memory voltage, which is controlled by an APW722. Doesn't support I2C either, or any other kind of communication standard. That voltage controller puts out whatever voltage it was set to in the factory. It's never going to put out a different one unless something goes seriously wrong. There's no way to access it via software. You can't even check how much power is going through it. Then there's the auxiliary voltage, which is also controlled by an APW722. So there's no way to access that one either. And then you finally have vCore. vCore is controlled by the 3567B, the International Rectifier 3567B, and that thing has I2C support. And it has 2 VR, like PWM, 2 individual voltage settings. So you can have like vCore and memory on it, or you could have vCore and auxiliary on it, or something like that. Like an R9 290X, the 3567B controls both your memory controller voltage and it controls your vCore voltage. So you can actually control both of those voltages. But on Polaris cards, the 3567B only does vCore. It's not actually wired to any of the other voltages. So that software voltage doesn't actually control anything. I'm not sure if it does anything. Theoretically, it should do nothing. And unfortunately, I now don't have any Polaris cards left, so I can't really try to test that out. But to test that out again and like check anything if I'm wrong about anything. But from memory, when I was testing that voltage out, it doesn't do anything. Like, it literally doesn't affect any of the big VRMs on the GPU. There might be some kind of really, really small VRM that I can't even find that voltage controls, but I really, really doubt it. So I have no idea what that voltage is. But anyway, I assumed because that voltage, that software voltage, which doesn't actually do anything or control anything or literally, like, well, at least all the RX 480s I tested don't have it actually hooked up to anything. Like, it doesn't do anything. So that voltage is 1 volt. So I assumed that the memory controller voltage is 1 volt. That was the wrong assumption to make. In reality, the GTR's stock memory controller voltage is 0.9 volts. And that's with me using a really dodgy ground reference. So I'm referencing my ground from the case, which tends to read a tiny bit higher than if you referenced right across the capacitor of the VRM output or something like that. So, you know, I was reading like 0.911, but basically it's 0.9 or lower for that voltage. Well, I went and modded that voltage to run at 1.1 volts. Bad idea. Very bad idea. So there's a good chance that me modding the auxiliary rail like that, or the thermal paste thing, and I'm pointing to the monitor which you can't see, so, or the thermal paste spread is what killed the memory controller on the RX 480. So, yeah, that's great. That's absolutely freaking incredible. And both of those, well, one of them isn't really avoidable. Like the thermal paste one, I couldn't have really known. You know, once you push the, once the heatsink is mounted, you just gotta sort of pray that your dot method or line method actually spread out the way you want it to spread out. Because you can't go and check it, you know, you don't have x-ray vision. And even if you did, that giant chunk of copper would make that really hard. But, yeah, so, couldn't have really known about the thermal paste not spreading out like that. But if I just followed the most basic rule of volt modding, which is check what the freaking stock voltage is with a freaking multimeter, I could have really avoided at least the fact that I was pushing so much voltage through the memory controller. There's also a chance that, you know, maybe if I just screwed up the thermal paste application and the voltage was lower, then the circuit would still work, you know. The extra voltage obviously didn't help anything, and if it was heat that killed it, then the extra voltage definitely made that even worse than if it wasn't there. So yeah, so first things first, don't assume you know a voltage. Always run the card, check it with a multimeter. Now, the reason why I didn't do that is because doing that is a pain in the neck. Okay, it takes forever to, like, it's just so, you know, you're like, okay, let's stick the card in the system, then you have to probe all your voltages, and it's just a pain to do that. And so I was like, yeah, I totally know what the memory controller voltage is. And then I went and did my volt mods from there. I should have checked. I really should have checked. So, yeah. GTR is now dead. I can't really do any more RX 480 content because I don't actually have a working RX 480 at this point. I do still have a bunch of Fury cards, so one of those will be ending up on LN2. And I think, you know, if everything I did wrong on the GTR means that one of the Furies, like, there will only be one Fury on LN2, or I don't know, maybe I should run all of them on LN2 until they're all except one dead, because one of them lives in my personal system, so that one needs to work. But yeah, it sucks. Yeah, well, so, you know, looking forward, what do I plan to do? Well, now I have a pretty large collection of dead GPUs, and I figured, well, I have all these dead GPUs with not working cores, but the VRMs still work. And my last attempt at making a power board went terrible. So, I mean, if there's 3 dead GPUs, that means I have 3 chances. One of them's gotta work. So that's sort of what I'm looking into doing, because, like, I legitimately really like the V-Core VRM on the GTR. It's a Fury X VRM. You know, that's, like, what more could you ask for? And the thing is, since it's such a nice VRM, you know, it would be a great way to power older GPUs that don't need that much juice, or even relatively modern GPUs, you know. It's just a case of really, like, getting that VRM onto them, which, you know, it's doable. So the plan is, because the GTR shares PCB, like, a lot of its PCB design with a reference RX 480. So I have a dead reference RX 480. I have a dead HD 7870. So the plan is fire one. If I can hotwire one of them to fire up before I start, like, last time I tried to build a power board, I first axed the thing in half and then was like, oh, now it's short circuited. Okay, I have no idea how to fix this. This time the plan is I'm gonna first get the VRM to fire up with the whole card fully intact, except I'm not going to have it in a PCIe slot, because if it's in a PCIe slot, it's cheating. So I'm going to fire it up by, you know, adding, like, a SATA connector, because a SATA connector has 5 volt, 3.3 volts, and 12 volts, which are the 3 voltages. Like, 5 volts is not always necessary. 3.3 and 12 volts are, so you always need those two. So I can use a SATA connector and fire up a few of these VRMs, and if they all fire up the way I want to, then it's going to be a case of chopping the cards up and adding solder points to them, and like, well, solder bars, which I need to figure out how to do that. But yeah, you know, I'm going to have more power boards to use, and actually what might end up happening is I really want to pull the e-power off of the GTX 570, which would completely disable the GTX 570, because what happened on that card is I didn't read the data sheet, broke the voltage controller, and was like, well, the voltage controller's broken, so I need V-Core somehow. Let's just add an e-power to it, because there was no way I was salvaging the V-Core, like, the V-Core VRM at that point, because I don't have SMD repair equipment, and I ripped out one of the main, like, one really important trace. So yeah, I decided, let's just throw an e-power on it. That's the best thing I can do. But now the problem is the e-power is on the 570, which means if I want to power something, like, originally I bought the e-power to e-power my GTX 590. The moment I pull the e-power off of the 570 is, you know, not going to work. So, you know, maybe the GTR might get a new life as the VRM for the GTX 570, or I might use it as a VRM for a motherboard, because there's a certain motherboard that the VRM is kind of questionable on it, and I'd really like to run that motherboard for some overclocking. So yeah, that'll be interesting, you know. Just having power boards, in my opinion, is just useful. So I do definitely want to at least try salvage the VRM from the GTR, because the core is beyond repair at this point. That memory controller is completely toasted. So, yeah, and now this video is 20 minutes long, so sorry for rambling for so long. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. It's so stupid to say that. But, yeah, thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.